Okay, so we are live. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the MAETBridge webinar series. My name is Rohit Mehta, and I'm a doctoral student in the Education Psychology and Educational Technology program at Michigan State University. And it is my distinct pleasure to be hosting today's episode. The Bridge is a production of the Masters in Education Technology program at Michigan State University, and through this program, we aim to provide high quality and free professional development for educators on issues of pressing importance in education technology. We have a very interesting panel of guests joining us today. Here to talk about technology integration in mathematics classroom, we have with us Dr. Sam Otten, who is an assistant professor of math education at the University of Missouri. And accompanying him, we have two of our MAET alumni. First, Ryan Brown, who has taught 11 years in Virginia and overseas, and is currently the head of the middle school math department at the Anglo-American School of Moscow, Russia. A fun fact about Sam and Ryan that we learned today, that they are both originally from Upper Michigan. Apparently, UP is a source of tech and math geniuses. Our third guest, who's also an MAT alumni, Elizabeth Kupecki, who teaches math at Academy of Aerospace and Engineering at Greater Hartford Academy of Math and Science in Connecticut, unfortunately is running late because her flight got delayed. Let's hope that she makes it, better late than never. I should also note that my colleague, Michelle Hagerman, who has hosted many of the previous episodes of the MAETBridge, is here as well, and she'll be monitoring the back channel conversations and bringing insight from our viewers to the live conversation. If you're joining us for the first time, you can follow the live stream at bridge.educ.msu.edu. There, you will find an open Etherpad where you can contribute to the conversation. You can also choose to tweet during the live stream. Just add hashtag MAETBridge to your tweets. Okay, so let's get started. We'll begin with each of our guests introducing themselves and telling us more about their work pertaining to the technology integration to support learning in mathematics classrooms. For the sake of an order, let's start with Sam and followed by Ryan. So the floor is yours, Sam.
Sure, yeah, I'm Sam, and my research actually focuses on middle and high school mathematics students' engagement in mathematical practices, so I'm really interested in seeing how students become actively involved in reasoning and improving, in problem solving, and in attending to precision, and those kind of mathematical ways of thinking and interacting. But I've found myself more and more getting interested in technology because technology is becoming a very important sort of mediating factor in students' engagement. So I've become very interested in things like iPads and tablets because those become an important player in the classroom, and it becomes a tool through which students can engage in problem solving or reasoning or attending to precision. And I've been interested in apps like the PhotoMath app. I've been interested in flipped classrooms, and for me, I'm interested in flipped classrooms because it's a potential way to change the nature of students' experiences in mathematics classrooms. But it's not necessarily a change. It could just be a kind of reversal of where you do the work without changing much. So I've found myself becoming interested in those areas, and I've also been working with pre-service teachers on one-to-one implementation of tablets. So I've been gaining experience on really having a lot of tablets in the classroom as well.
Thank you. Ryan, if you can take the floor.
Sure. This is my fourth year in Moscow. You know, kids are kids no matter where they are. You know, you have those that excel in math, those that don't do very well in math. You know, I have many students that use Khan Academy to help themselves, you know, fill in those holes or gaps. we try not using that because we want them to know the mathematics behind it. So we're using Dan Meyer's 3Acts. He also there's also 100 questions that's very similar with that philosophy, along with many apps that I use within the classroom, just to keep the kids engaged, either just for skills or working on the skills behind those mathematics. The mathematics behind what's going on with those algorithms.
Right. Thank you, Ryan, for introducing yourself and what you do. And we'll move on to Liz, but we know that you just joined in, so I'd help you catch up.
Okay.
We were just starting, and we were just introducing each other. And
Okay.
as you saw, that Sam was telling us about what he does in his work and about his research, and Ryan was telling us what kind of technology they're integrating in their classrooms. And we did introduce you briefly. We told you where you work, but if you would like, please go ahead and talk about where you're from, what you're doing right now, and how are you integrating technology in your work and your classroom.
So I currently teach in Hartford, Connecticut. Hopefully you could all hear me fine.
Hear you perfectly.
Okay, awesome. And I teach at a math and science academy. So our students typically have a one-to-one laptop system. So we are able to use, we use Schoology very frequently. So we typically use that as a means of communication. And I use some of the embedded assessments in Schoology, like the discussions and quizzes, to help students engage, not only in the classroom, but also outside of the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to teaching in Hartford, I taught a resource Algebra 1 in Michigan, in Muskegon. In that class, because it was students who had special needs, we used a lot of actually in that program. So I gave students a lot more freedom as far as their representations. So I had some students, for example, that would do scatter plots using Minecraft and things like that. So that was kind of my experience with technology in that classroom. Was I used it as I would give students a list of tools and basically said, choose whichever of these work for you after I'd introduced them when they needed to represent something mathematically. And like Ryan said, we also did a lot of the Dan Meyer's, pardon me, 3-act math tasks.
I think you could do some Dan Brown code breaking too.
Yeah, totally.
Good.
Thank you so much for jumping in, Liz. And I know that you are kind of catching your breath, so I reiterate what I was just telling Sam and Ryan before you join, that feel free to jump in if you find something interesting in
Okay.
the conversations, and if Sam and Ryan are talking about something that you could contribute to, please feel to jump in. So thank you for your introductions, guys. An interesting question that pops up from what Sam was just talking about. Sam, a question to you. What is the difference between using new technology, such as tablets, as a replacement versus as an innovation?
So yeah, this has been, for me, a valuable way to think about the way that I try to use technology. So first of all, progress moves forward, and so there is this replacement that naturally happens, and replacement is just bringing in a new technology to do something that basically you could already do, or to do it in the same way that you could do before. So like if you had a chalkboard, you can replace that with a whiteboard and you can use it in basically the same way, and then you could replace that with a smartboard if you're using the smartboard just to literally write things on the smartboard in the same way that you could with a whiteboard. Or there's, like if you have students reading from a textbook, you could replace that with a digital textbook, but you're still using it in the same way of having students look at the sections or do problems from that. And so it's kind of not a very exciting use of technology, but it's not necessarily bad either, because if you can have one tablet with all of your textbooks instead of carrying all of them around, that's actually a pretty useful replacement. Or maybe the smartboard is cleaner than having all of the ink and chalk dust and stuff from previous ones. So it's not that replacement is bad, it's just that it's different than innovation. And so for me, when I'm trying to use technology, I try to think about, am I really innovating, and am I using it to do something new and interesting and help the students get new opportunities to learn that they didn't have without the technology? So innovation would be using a piece of technology in a way that it allows you to do something that you couldn't do without it. So like with the smartboard, if you draw up a graph or you draw a mathematical object and then you grab it and copy it and paste it a bunch of times, or you grab it and rotate it around and then stretch it out and use the actual dynamic features of the smartboard, that's now an innovation, because good luck trying to do that with a whiteboard. And for me then, when I think about, okay, I'm using the new features, but am I doing it in a way that's somehow helping me meet a learning goal or helping me give students opportunities to learn important things? So that's what I try to do, and so for me, with using tablets a lot this year, one-to-one tablets, some of it I'm just using as replacement. Like, okay, we're going to do this reading, or we're going to have these problems on the tablet PDF instead of handing out paper. That's a replacement. But then I also tried to do things that were innovative, tried to use the tablet to give me some kind of new leverage for student learning.
Right. That's very interesting. And speaking of replacement and innovation, it kind of makes me think of what Ryan was just talking about. He was talking about how they use Khan Academy videos, but they try not to focus too much on them. So Ryan, my question to you is there something out there better than Khan Academy videos? And how can a math teacher at any level use videos or real-life examples for many entry points?
Sure. With Dan Meyer's work, he's pulling the math apart so the kids can come in any avenue. They can, if they're very low in math or they're very high, they can come in at any level and still succeed in the question. So, all students learn differently. It's very much personalizing their learning of what get them where they're at and try to get everyone where they need to be. So there's an example that I just used this past week in class, where using a clip from Futurama, where a little backstory of this series, the guy is frozen for 1,000 years and wakes up. So he had a bank account with 93 cents in it. After 1,000 years, how much money does he have in that account? So it's set up that way where, the kids are engaged of, the problem is set. They can then, help each other out. Well, I know this aspect and put all their information together to get to the final product without asking them right away, what is the answer, but having them go through the process of what you already know and go through that. Right. And just to touch base on what Sam was saying earlier with the smartboard in the classroom, if teachers can get their kids to touch that board every day, learning and growing in mathematics will grow exponentially.
So,
got a problem.
we have here, but I'm guessing we are still. Sam was just mentioning, there was an interesting conversation going on. He mentioned the difference between replacement versus innovation. Does that resonate in your own work in some ways?
Pardon, I don't know if you were speaking to me. I'm not getting sound.
Oh.
Here.
Okay.
You have to restart.
No, I can use my microphone.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So my question to you was, we were just talking about what Sam was mentioning, the difference between replacement versus innovation. And we were wondering if that kind of resonates in your own work in some way. Do you feel the same thing, that technology has been, like such as tablets, have been used as a replacement device, but now there are some work in innovation as well?
I definitely agree, and I agree with a lot of what Sam was saying as far as replacement has value, giving students tools such as access to Khan Academy lectures when they're outside of class. However, there's a lot of things. I particularly like online applets. I know FET through the University of Colorado has a lot of fantastic interactive applets, which is something that is very different than what we could do in the math classroom before. It was unless a lot of times we had fancy lab equipment or the animations, really, there would have been no ways to do that without students having access to computers. So I think that those type of things really are an innovation. And as Ryan is saying, I think it gives students more access points. So I know when I've used those applets in the past, the observations students make tend to be extremely varied. So I definitely think there is movement towards innovation. I think in some cases it depends on the culture of the school and the culture of the math department in particular.
Right. So a follow-up question. How does, because this kind of reminds me of UDL, how does technology help in the math classroom to incorporate this universal design and learning? Specifically, how does technology allow for students to represent their learning in a variety of ways?
Can I start that one?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. We're just going looking at the innovation. Just using a standard document camera where you can take an image of one student's work and have multiple students, using a chirp, the chirp at, and sending it to all the students, and then they can, either correct that student's work or point out certain things and then resend it, and you can share that either in small groups or to a large class.
Right. So, so I'd like to go back to Sam on that. So Sam, based on what we're just talking about and the question that I asked, that how does technology allow for students to represent their learning in a variety of ways? Do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's one place where there really can be innovation and not just replacement. So speaking from my experience with tablets, I think it's really helpful to have students represent their thinking in a variety of ways so that you don't just have one fragile way to think about a mathematics problem or a mathematics piece of knowledge, but you're really flexible in seeing it from different angles. And so one thing, is to kind of try to put some kind of visual to it or put some kind of symbols to it to represent that idea. But to me, it's kind of one thing to just sketch that down on a piece of paper or sketch that up in front of a class. But it's another thing, to me, that's where the innovation can come in from technology, is if you can share that in new ways. Like you can push it out to your classmates and have them actually then interact with your idea, or a student can have their peers interact with their mathematical idea. The other way that I think there can be innovation is, like Liz was mentioning, with simulations and some of the dynamic changes and things that you can do can just allow for the representation to be, to me, more of a source of learning than some of the stuff that you could have done before, prior to like the interactive apps or the simulations, or having these tablets where you can really drag things around, stretch them, and move them. So I think it, first of all, can make it shareable in a new way, but it can also, I think, make it tangible and kind of flexible in a new way. And both of those, I think, can be innovations to actually help change the students' experiences with the mathematical ideas.
Right. Going back to Liz, because Sam just mentioned something that you said earlier. Do you want to add something? Because I have another question for you.
I think you hit the nail on that. I mean, my personal take on the representation is I use technology when I feel it's appropriate, but I still give students the pencil and paper option. I find a lot of students are still really comfortable with that. But like Ryan said, I think using the document camera allows the integration.
Okay, so
Here we are again.
back.
We're back.
So just to let our viewers know that we had some technical difficulties and Google Hangouts stopped recording and we were still talking. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump back to where we left, and we're going to merge the videos later and put that on our website, bridge.educ.msu.edu, for you to watch later. So we were talking about technology integration in math classrooms, and we were talking about technology as a replacement versus innovation, and I know that Liz was talking when we lost the video, but feel free to jump in, you guys. If Liz, you want to continue, go ahead, and if not, Ryan or Sam, you can jump in and we can continue our conversation.
I think where we left off was the choice of whether to use innovative technology or to use replacement. And what I was speaking about was that I typically, depending on the application, try to give my students a choice just because of the comfort level of my students in trying to integrate UDL. So I try to look at, for students that are more comfortable having, say, if they're doing a presentation, some students are still very comfortable doing a poster.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have students who are very comfortable creating a website. And so it's whatever way that they can convey their learning and that I can assess their learning, I try and leave that up to them. And oftentimes I'll give students a set of websites or tools that I'm familiar with, but I find that students often will have their own that they've explored that can do the task very well.
Right.
And I really agree with kind of Liz's mindset, where it's really about the students' learning and the students' experiences first, and then thinking about how can the technology support that, rather than thinking of this technology first and saying, oh, I really want to use this technology, so I'm going to make it happen.
Right.
To me, that's kind of getting it backwards. I think you really need to think of the learning goals and where the students are starting from, and then make choices about what kind of technology to use to try to meet that. That's also the mentality that I try to take as well.
Right. So, Sam, is that does that resonate with what you are doing in Russia, or
Ryan's in Russia, yeah.
Sorry, Ryan, does that resonate with your work in Russia? Because meeting the students where they are instead of forcing the technology on them.
Oh, totally. I know Sam in his introduction brought up an app called Photomath. The kids were like, oh no, don't let Mr. Brown see me use this. I'm like, use it. If you're getting a wrong answer, go back, figure out what you're doing. It's not 100% correct all the time right now. It may read a number incorrectly or a variable incorrectly, but they're able to see that and go, they can go, oh, the computer's wrong, and here's the reason why, or oh, I can go back and see why I made my mistake.
I think
so. Yes.
So. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just going off the fact that you brought up Photomath. So
Go for it.
Ryan, like it sounds like to you weren't intimidated by the existence of Photomath. That you kind of feel like you have these goals of students understanding the math and understanding why things work underneath, and not just getting the answer. And I think if you're kind of approach mathematics teaching from that perspective, then you're not directly threatened by Photomath. Because if Photomath is just a way to look at a problem and get the answer, that's not a threat if you're having students do a lot deeper things or a lot richer things. Like if you're having students do the explanations, the connecting, the critiquing, arguing alternatives, like if your students are doing those kinds of things, then it's not a threat that Photomath can do just this menial little calculation or getting a specific answer. And so for me, I'm currently with a colleague here at the University of Missouri. We're thinking a lot about Photomath, and we're going to write an article, an essay about it, because we're seeing different reactions to it. Some teachers want to ban Photomath, and so I view that as they feel very threatened by Photomath. So then we're thinking about why are they so threatened. Other people might want to restrict it, like I'm going to restrict when students are allowed to use Photomath. And then others, I think, are more like Ryan is kind of talking about how I'm not directly threatened by Photomath because I'm doing things that are a lot more human and a lot deeper and a lot more rich than just computing answers.
And to go along with that, something I say in the classroom is, if I wanted a list of answers, there's an answer key. So we're looking for much more meaning and understanding than just getting to the correct answer.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, if as a teacher, if you are just looking for the answers, then Photomath is a pretty legitimate threat because Photomath can give the answers most of the time correctly. You're right, it's not actually 100% accurate, so that's a problem mathematically if we're trying to look for something that's 100% kind of guaranteed.
Sure.
Right.
And I actually encourage students. Sorry, just one last thing with Photomath. If they're stuck on a problem, if they have the app, to see what the answer could be and try to, backwards work it to see where their error was.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm
This is the thing,
actually not familiar with photomath, but I was saying a lot of what you're saying sounds familiar as far as students' use of Wolfram Alpha.
Yeah,
I have
same idea.
a lot of students who love Wolfram Alpha, and the students, I think teachers feel the same way. Some teachers really hate Wolfram Alpha because it can give an answer to a student, but I personally really like it because it allows students, at least the way that I view it, to kind of get unstuck sometimes. It will provide explanations of concepts, and so I've had a lot of students that really see it as this homework savior where if they're stuck, they have another resource. And so I know, for example, our AP Calculus teacher, our AP BC Calc teacher, encourages students to go to Wolfram Alpha and type in, an integral they're looking for and read through the explanation, because it really is about understanding and not just about getting the right answer.
Yeah, I think on one level, it can be these learning goals that are deeper that the technology can't do. So like I was saying about reasoning or justifying or connecting or critiquing, like we can have our students do those things as human beings, and the technology can't do those things in the same way. I think the other way, though, is like Liz was just saying, that we can have our students be users of the tools. So like our students can just think strategically about, oh, I have something called Wolfram Alpha that can actually help me figure out what I'm trying to figure out. So I'm going to be an intelligent user of that tool, and then I'm going to interpret it and bring what I get from Wolfram Alpha, bring it back into my thinking or bring it back to the mathematical conversations that I'm having. So for me, that also is a kind of a richer learning goal to say, oh, I want my students to know that there are tools around that do these things for you, and so you can be the user of them. Again, I don't think that's a direct threat, kind of just like Liz was saying. She's saying that can be something great for the students to know that it exists.
And to connect to what the two of you are saying, I've just recently started using, and I'll probably mispronounce the website, but it's Desmos Online Calculator.
Yeah.
Using the exponential growth, and with just having the kids play with the numbers, they're manipulating all these different graphs. They're having 2 or 3 or more up on the screen, so they can actually see, if you change the growth factor, if you change the y-intercept, how it affects the graph completely. So not just looking at one solution, but looking at the whole mathematics behind it of, if I tweak this, how does that affect? And then they're able to have a much better understanding.
Right. So it's a great conversation about these resources that students could use to get unstuck and to understand the concepts better. But there's also the idea that Liz kind of talked about in her introduction. She said that she uses Minecraft to teach them about scatter plots. And I find that very interesting because this is meeting students exactly where they are. They enjoy playing games, and let's use games to teach them these concepts, as opposed to the ideas of using interactive apps that have one specific or multiple functionalities inside the math domain. So where are you guys on using games or other applications that were not intended for the purpose of teaching math? Let's start with Sam.
Oh, sure. So in my, my growing experience using one-to-one tablets, I actually have found some success with using what I would call non-mathematical apps. So things like iMovie, just any kind of sort of like photo editor or video editing software. And so that's something that they might use anyway, and some of my students do use that anyway.
Right.
But then what I tried to do was think about how can I take the fact that they use, video editing. Like we have videos all over the place now. Everybody's on YouTube all the time and Vine videos and all this stuff. So I was thinking, how can I use that to do something mathematical? And one thing that I did that I feel was fairly successful was I used video editing to kind of entice students into building a rich argument, like actually pretty much like a mathematical proof. And I have to give some credit to Dov Zaskis because I was kind of inspired by his research. But what I did was I had the students, here's a mathematical conjecture.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can have the students try to prove that conjecture. Nothing really fancy there. But what I did to try to make it more rich and get more interaction about it was I said, okay, you're not just going to write a proof of this conjecture. What I want you to actually do is write a little script of these two characters where one character is trying to lead the other one through the proof, and the second character is not understanding it and is like sort of getting confused or getting lost in the proof, or is thinking from a different kind of angle. So instead of just giving a straightforward proof, they have this kind of back and forth of like, here's an idea for the proof, but then we take a left turn and then we course correct back here, and then we are a little confused, but we clarify that it is working out, and then we end up getting a proof. What they did was they wrote the script, and then they filmed it with their iPads, and then they can edit it together, and then they can present this kind of short little proof play. But by doing that, they had a lot more interaction about the actual mathematical ideas in the justification than if they were just trying to write down a straight proof.
Right.
But that's not a mathematical app. It's not like a proving app. That was just iMovie.
Yeah. So I jump to Ryan on the same topic. Ryan, in your experience, because you also talked a little about games and other apps that are not intended for the purpose of math, do you think playing games can really help students learn math?
Well, yes. I think they're using their skills without realizing that they're using those skills.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a list that I know was placed up on the website. But one of the ones that my kids really enjoy, it's called Factor Samurai, and it's very similar to a Fruit Ninja type of game, where they're slashing instead of fruit, it's numbers. So you have to slash all the composite numbers, but you'll get penalized with slashing prime numbers. So they're already with sometimes it's just a one player, sometimes other people are looking on, so they're all yelling at the machine, get the 24, oh, now it's a 4 and a 6, get those. So they're really getting into it, where it's just a basic game referencing another game, but the kids really get into it. They don't really think that they're working on those skills, but they are really refining them.
Right. So jumping on to Liz, what does your experience with Minecraft say? Do you agree with Sam and Ryan on this?
Yeah, I've had mixed results, if I'm honest, with math games. So sometimes I've used traditional math games, well, I guess traditional, but video games that essentially just reinforce rote skills. And I've had mixed results with those. Some students really improve in their skills by playing those games, and other students, I feel like it's very engaging for them, but not necessarily productive. I know last year I experienced a time where I had students do a web quest, and as part of that web quest, they had a chance to play various math games. And I found that when I assessed their learning after, they had not learned as much as I was hoping they had. With Minecraft, I really think that I've played Minecraft a little bit. Actually, the idea to do scatter plots in Minecraft came from a student. He suggested and explained to me how it could be done, and said, I really think this is great, and the fact that you can make signs in Minecraft, so the fact that you could have to discuss labels and discuss appropriate labeling and scales. We definitely talked a lot more about scale when we used Minecraft than we would have had we just done it on paper and pencil, because we had to talk about how the blocks were spaced out when we did the scatter plot. And so it was very effective in that regard, and the fact that the kids were playing Minecraft in class, just that idea for them, was very engaging, and they were very excited about it. I personally would like to incorporate Minecraft more into the classroom, but that's been the only opportunity that I've kind of come across naturally so far. I think in general, I myself love games. I love reading about, for example, the Institute of Play. I subscribe to their newsletter, and they have some really great ideas as far as incorporating ideas from games into education. Just the idea of engagement and immediate feedback and all of those things are fantastic.
Right. So a follow-up question on that. So in what role does student feedback play in such situations, especially when they're doing something that they really enjoy, and you know that student feedback is also important. So, what role does that play in your work?
For me, it's very important. I want students to give me feedback, but I also want to see them learning. So I've had students who said that was really fantastic, and I learned a lot, and I had fun. And there's other times where the students kind of just say, and I don't necessarily get the learning part of it. And so I always try and assess back and reflect that I want that intersection of fun and learning, because I do need to meet the standards that I'm supposed to meet and
Right.
things like that. So
Right.
student feedback is very important, though.
Yeah. So, jumping on to Ryan, a similar question, but so Liz talked about like looking back and thinking of feedback. How, if as a teacher, what about if I want a quick feedback from my students and I want to do something about it now? What can I do about that?
Okay. Um, Again, with the list of apps that I provided, one of the ones that I use all the time, and it's free, it's called Plickers, where I know a lot of schools don't have money for the handheld clickers, so it's a play on words there. But you get what looks kind of like a QR code, and each kid gets that. They can glue it into their notebook. It can stay in their locker. It costs just what a piece of paper costs. And then you have the device, and just looking around the room, just holding up your iPad or your phone, you can scan the room, and it picks up all of those images. You can actually get from an ABCD choice. So I know where many schools in the States, if you're practicing for those end-of-the-year tests, or you just want to make sure the kids aren't making those silly mistakes that they often do by having a list of 4 answers or 5. You can easily get that feedback. What I often do with that is, even I have all the information, and I go, the students could have 100% correct, but I go, why would one student pick the letter C? And so we're having that conversation of, what that common mistake could be. And sometimes, maybe there are 2 or 3 kids that have that common mistake. So, they can still have that conversation. Sometimes they're the ones that are raising their hand. Oh, I know it's wrong, but a student might think this. And what they're really doing is talking about their own thinking, just disguising it so they're not feeling, in middle school that they're like not doing something correct.
Right. So, Sam, would you like to add to that on the topic of feedback and, in fact, quick feedback? And how do you look at it from a research perspective?
The main thing that was coming to mind for me is about statistics education, or somebody that's doing anything with data and statistics, because that seems like the technology and things like Ryan was just mentioning provides an opportunity for the teacher not only to get quick feedback, but to actually collect data that then you could turn back to the students, and you could start to do some statistical questions or statistical analyses. I feel like my area isn't statistics ed, but I feel like there's just so many possibilities to populate data sets so much easier and have them be relevant data sets that the students care about, and then you can actually start also using this technology to analyze, display, work with those data sets in ways that even just like 10 years ago you could have never done. Because now you could get the whole class to input something and have it real quick, and it's not going to take any class time at all. Or you could go grab information from the web and then pull it down into some kind of software or app and start analyzing it. So this isn't kind of like the teacher using the feedback for formative purposes, but I think the teacher could get some feedback, or you could just collect data to use with the students.
I was going to add one technology that I've used for getting feedback, and also as a learning tool. We used the TI Navigator system last year. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but with TI inspires, and then the Navigator connects them all together. And it was a really fantastic learning experience for the students. Again, it was engaging and fun because it was this new thing. Our school actually did not have a set of them, but our ISD owned a set that you could rent out. So we were able to use it for a week, and it allowed me to basically screen capture everyone at a given point and then display that for all students. And of course, there's some question there if you don't want to display students or embarrass students by displaying their names. So it was all done anonymously. So it was just 20 graphs displayed on the board, and we could discuss differences that we saw in people's graphs, and that I think gave students a chance to self-assess and gave me feedback on how the lesson was going, and gave students feedback on where they were individually, because they obviously knew which was their graph. And likewise, even without the TI Navigator system, that could be done with, since we have one-to-one laptops in the classroom at the school I'm currently at, with screen capture software.
And if teachers have students with phones but not tablets or laptops, I think it's called Poll Anywhere. I don't know if anyone else has heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
But like Poll Anywhere, you can just use with the students' phones. So you don't even have to have laptops or anything.
So, I'm trying to think of ways to wrap this around, because we talked about general applications, we talked about mathematics-specific applications, we talked about games, and we talked about applications for providing feedback. So how do you, as a teacher and researcher, use mediated applications and to support student learning of important mathematical ideas?
For me, actually, Desmos is one that I use quite a bit that Ryan already mentioned. But for me, that's been easier to use as a graphing calculator that's a bit more intuitive and that students can have on their smartphones or on their tablets instead of having to have a separate piece of hardware like a graphing calculator. So that one we used pretty regularly to do lots of different things. It does really good stats things, it does algebra things, and it gives you the dynamic. You can drag your sliders and see how the different parameters affect things. So that's a common one. But then other than that, to me, I actually mostly use kind of like the general apps like I was talking about with iMovie, or different note-taking ones like Notability, where they can write their work. A nice thing with Notability is students can write their mathematical work kind of like they would do with a piece of paper, so that would be like a replacement use of it, which is fine. But the innovation is with Notability that you can actually record audio in sync with the writing, so you could actually have a verbal explanation go along with the writing, and then you can use different colors and resize things and stuff. So I've used that as a way to kind of, and because the students are comfortable with it, they can represent their mathematical thinking a little bit more dynamically than with just paper and pencil.
How about you, Ryan? How do you try to balance the use of apps to support student learning?
Well, kind of going with what Sam does, just trying to not use it just to use it, but to actually integrate it a little bit more. Very similar to Notability, I've used Explain Everything in the past, which is very similar, and having the kids try to make their own, brand of Khan Academy type of videos, where they're either, explaining the process or explaining how to, explaining the algorithm. But yeah, just very similar to what Sam said.
Right. And Liz?
Again, I would concur with Ryan and Sam. I do use Desmos a lot. Students tend to love Desmos as far as both a teaching tool and a tool that they can use instead of a graphing calculator, and a tool that they can use for homework. I know in pre-calculus, when students were learning about sine and cosine graphs, the fact that we could talk about different how phase changes occurred and things with Desmos, and actually show that with Desmos first, was really helpful. In general, as I stated earlier, the way that I balance apps and math education is I really often put it on the students as far as what they're comfortable with. I try and give them a variety of options. We use Schoology at our school, as I mentioned, and sometimes, for example, I gave students a Schoology assessment, but I still gave students the option, if for some reason Schoology doesn't work for you or you have trouble accessing Schoology, I gave them a paper and pencil option, or you could just email me. So I also have students take pictures of their homework sometimes and send it to me with questions. So lots of things, but most of the time it's on the students.
Right. So I know that we lost a lot of time because of technical difficulties today, and we're kind of starting to run out of time. So I'd try to tie back and come to a question that we ask all our guests. What is it about your work that you love the most? So we'd start with Sam. Tell us what you love about your work the most.
I'd say, I mean, I just love the fact that it's never the same from day to day. So I think this fits in with technology because technology is different every week. I feel like I'm now behind. You know, if I thought I was getting caught up on the technologies that are available, just wait a few weeks and you'll be behind again. But I think that's actually something that I enjoy about the job in general is that math education is so complex and such a rich field, and then when you add in the technology and how that fits into it, there's so many ideas to explore that it just seems like there's endless possibilities to be thinking about these things, trying them out, seeing how they work, modifying, and keep going. So I just enjoy the constant challenge and the fact that it's sort of a moving target actually makes it more fun.
Right. What about you, Ryan?
Well, I would say, you know, I've always wanted to be a teacher since I was third grade. You know, must have been inspired way back when, and never thought I would be teaching in Russia. But you know, just having this opportunity, you know, still teaching math, of connecting on a global level, working with so many interesting people, students, different ways of, you know, showing division, showing multiplication that, you know, just teaching in Virginia I never saw, or up in Michigan. So just having that opportunity of seeing, you know, different paths to get to the same answer.
Right. And Liz?
I think building on what Ryan said, I love working with students, and I feel like I learn something new from them every day, every year. That they're constantly, especially in terms of technology, constantly showing me new things and telling me new things. And in terms of math, unfortunately, I like to see students struggle, and I tell them that. I like to see them struggle through something because ultimately I love to see them have that, you know, aha, I got it moment. And I always tell them math is like a puzzle to me. And so when you finally, you know, solve that puzzle, it's, you know, a really gratifying moment. So that's something I love.
Right.
Yeah, if there's struggle happening, then that means there's a large possibility of learning to come out of that, right? Because you're putting effort in and you're doing it. And I think if technology can be seen as a tool, kind of like you mentioned earlier, Liz, when the students get to that point where they're struggling, that means it's ripe for learning. But if they feel like there's technology on their side, they can maybe make it through that struggle and come out the other side of it.
Right. Those are very inspiring answers, and I'm sure that all the teachers who would look at this video or who could not join us live would be really interested in seeing all these resources that you shared with us today. We have a bunch and tons of resources today, and we're going to add that to the Etherpad application on our website, bridge.educ.msu.edu. And I'm afraid that we are running out of time, so I'd like to thank all our guests, Sam, Ryan, and Liz. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to have you as our guests again sometime later. We'd definitely love to talk more about math and technology integration. And thank you all for watching, and have a good day.
Go green.
Thanks.
Go green.
Go white.
Hi. Bye, everybody.
Bye.